The year is 1963. The clock is ticking. The air is thick with tension and Sunday morning joy. Inside the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, 4 little girls are tying ribbons and adjusting sashes in the basement. They're getting ready for the church's youth day. Then, boom! In an instant, the walls shake, glass shatters. A terrorist bomb rips through the building, killing 4 innocent black girls. But what the headlines almost never told you is that a 5th little girl was in that room. And she survived. Her name is Sarah Collins Rudolph, and they almost erased her from history. Born in 1949 in Birmingham, Alabama, Sarah was the youngest of 8 children in the household of Alice and Arthur Collins, a working-class black family living under the crushing weight of segregation. Her older sister, Addie Mae Collins, was among the 4 girls who lost their lives that morning. Sarah was just 12 years old, a quiet, church-going child with no idea that one act of terror would change the rest of her life. The bomb, planted by white supremacists with deep ties to the Klan, wasn't just murder. It was a warning, a brutal, calculated act meant to terrify a growing civil rights movement. Most Americans know the names of the 4 girls who were killed: Addie Mae Collins, Denise McNair, Carol Robertson, and Cynthia Wesley. But Sarah Collins, Addie's younger sister, was left to survive the wreckage. She didn't die. Instead, she lost her right eye. Dozens of pieces of glass lodged into her face and body. Her vision was permanently damaged. Her life was never the same, and for decades, she was barely mentioned. Now you have to remember that this wasn't just an isolated act of hatred. This was Alabama. This was Birmingham under Jim Crow, a place where black families lived under daily threat, where justice was a word reserved for white men, and where the law often looked the other way when the Klan set things on fire. Between the 1940s and 1960s, Birmingham saw so many bombings in black neighborhoods that people began calling it Bombingham. These weren't one-offs, these were patterns. Homes were attacked, churches burned, lives ended, and almost no one was ever held accountable. Hospitals were segregated. Black victims weren't guaranteed care. Police reports were unreliable. White supremacists often had ties to city government. It was a city where the people who were supposed to protect you were sometimes the same ones who wanted you gone. When Martin Luther King Jr. marched through Birmingham, he called it the most thoroughly segregated city in America. And when he was thrown into jail, he didn't beg. He wrote one of the most famous letters in civil rights history, addressing those who told him to wait for change. But time wasn't healing anything. It was deepening the wounds. And far away in the north, Malcolm X was laying it bare. The most disrespected person in America is the black woman. Sarah Collins Rudolph would live the truth of that statement for the rest of her life. Not only did she survive that terrorist bombing, she lived in its aftermath. She suffered through more than 30 surgeries, years of recurring pain, glass still embedded in her skin, and a country that looked the other way. This is the part America doesn't want to talk about, the survivor. Because survival is messy. Survival means lawsuits, medical bills, trauma. It means someone has to take responsibility. So instead of lifting Sarah up, they left her behind. Even the justice system failed her. No one was held accountable until 1977, when Robert Chambliss was convicted. The other bombers weren't prosecuted until the 2000s. By then, Sarah Collins Rudolph had already lived through the horror and the silence. She testified. She relived it. And still, nothing. In 2013, the U.S. government gave posthumous congressional gold medals to the 4 girls who died. But what about Sarah, the one who had to live with the screams, the smell of blood, the shards of glass beneath her skin? Nothing. No medal. No restitution. No national headline saying, "She lived and we owe her everything." In 2020, Sarah's attorneys wrote a formal letter to Alabama's governor demanding restitution. They laid it all out, her injuries, her lifelong suffering, the state's failure to act. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey issued an apology. But you can't pay medical bills with apologies. When asked about compensation, the governor's office said it would need legislative action, a political shrug, a stall tactic, a silent door slammed shut. Again, this isn't just about one woman. It's about how America treats Black survivors. Because when Black pain is frozen in time, turned into a still image or a funeral program, it becomes easy to package, sell, memorialize. It's easier to paint a mural than to pay a hospital bill. White America has built entire industries, films, books, speeches, off the blood of our stories. But survivors? The ones who still need help decades later? They're rarely part of the script. Sarah has spent decades telling her story. She's spoken in classrooms, courtrooms, churches. And still, many people don't know her name. Every time the bombing is mentioned on TV, the same 4 girls are shown, the same 4 photos. But there were 5 children in that room. 1 walked out alive. Now in her 70s, Sarah Collins Rudolph is still living with the scars, literal and emotional. She wasn't honored like the others. She wasn't compensated. Her life became a quiet battle for dignity in a country that would rather forget her. And this isn't ancient history. In 2023, major Alabama news outlets reported that she still hasn't received a dime in compensation. In 2024, she was still advocating, still waiting, still asking America to do right by her. This is the part they don't put in textbooks. The survivor gets silence. The survivor gets ignored. The 4 little girls who died were mourned, remembered, and memorialized. Their names became part of history books. Their images appeared in public murals, documentaries, and presidential speeches. There were church dedications, plaques, and museum exhibits. Even filmmaker Spike Lee told their story in his powerful documentary, 4 Little Girls, which brought their names and faces to an international audience, rightfully so. But Sarah? Sarah was still alive, and somehow that made her harder to acknowledge. She didn't die, she suffered. And in a country where martyrdom is easier to market than survival, Sarah was inconvenient. She didn't fit the script. She had medical bills, legal fights, anguish. Her story required responsibility, and that's not something America gives easily to Black women. While the families of the deceased had opportunities to speak out, to stand behind podiums and demand justice, Sarah's own pain was pushed into the shadows. She was too hurt, too broken, too busy trying to heal to be put on display. No cameras followed her through her recovery. No special feature aired about the girl with glass in her face. No National Museum exhibit bore her name. Only decades later, after persistent advocacy, did people start listening. But by then, the narrative had hardened. It was always 4 girls, never 5. Sarah Collins Rudolph isn't just a name in a footnote. She's a living reminder that survivors of racial terrorism are still here, still hurting, still waiting. This is what happens when white supremacist violence doesn't just kill, but maims and still gets brushed aside. Hollywood might retell this story from a safe angle. History books might leave her out, but Miss Sarah? She won't be forgotten. We remember not just the 4 little girls who were murdered, but the 5th little girl who lived. This is still a stain on America's history, one that hasn't faded. And today, we honor all of them. We thank their families, and we thank Miss Sarah Collins Rudolph for surviving, for speaking, and for refusing to let the world look away. Scope News tells the truth. Here are the facts. Reporting on the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing is well documented in historical archives and civil rights case files. Key interviews with Sarah Collins. Rudolph have been published in major outlets such as NPR, AL.com, and the Montgomery Advertiser. Her testimony during the trials of Chambliss, Blanton, and Cherry are on public record. Her 2020 restitution request and Governor Ivey's apology are documented in official state communications and legal filings. The legacy of Jim Crow Alabama, Bombingham, and the state's racist legal systems are supported by multiple civil rights histories, court records, and first-hand accounts. Sarah's own speeches and interviews serve as the core testimony of this video essay. Legal disclaimer. Scope News produces investigative, historical, and educational journalism based on the best available sources, interviews, archival records, and public documents at the time of publication. While we strive for accuracy and completeness, errors or omissions can occur, and some details may evolve as new information emerges. Viewer discretion is advised due to the sensitive, violent, and disturbing nature of racial terror events discussed here. This report is intended for informational, educational, and documentary purposes and does not provide legal, medical, or financial advice. We make our best effort to be truthful, but we acknowledge the emotional weight and historical trauma these topics carry.